Okay, coming at you for part two, and I promise it will not be, I will keep it to 15 minutes. Okay, so the second paragraph of this particular entry from your peer takes us into the contrast, or excuse me, takes us beyond the contrast that we've gotten up here. And remember, his whole point is we've got these surface contrasts, right? He's given us some evidence of those up here, but then he's really moving us towards what he considers to be the true nature of the story's moral, which is more about the similarity of them. Now, here, I'm back to Green, where remember, Green is author argument. So understand, though, that they are one and the same, and that they come intentionally misshapen from the mint that cast them. So again, this writer is continuing this analogy, or at this point, it's an extended metaphor. Remember, he began with this notion of Hector and Achilles, two sides of the same coin, and he returns to it here, right? This idea that they both come from this mint. So again, the culture, right, that has cast them, they are intentionally misshapen. So in some ways, this writer is critiquing the culture that would produce an Achilles and a Hector. So as opposed to saying Hector's good, Achilles is bad, which this writer considers to be surface, he's saying, in fact, they're two sides of the same coin, the coin being culture that's produced them, and that culture is misshapen. So I really enjoyed this lovely poetic extended metaphor. But again, the argument here is that they are the same, not that they stand in diametric opposition. He thinks that's surface, but that they're the same. So we're moving into purple. Purple's evidence. Achilles had the option to turn back and to look for a long and happy life back home. A lot of you pointed that out. How many ships might have stayed in port had he never left in the first place? So he's questioning Achilles' entire, we might call it raison d'etre, why he exists, his reason for existence. Many times Hector had a chance to return to the gates. Instead, he chose to pursue and hew the Achaeans out on the beach. So again, we've got our writer actually critiquing our two warriors for actually going through with war. Again, meaning that they are the same and that they come from this warring culture that has produced them both. Notice again how the blue is author commentary. So this is all the author making sense of his own arguments. And again, just as before when he says, I urge the reader up here, he says, see then. So he's literally hailing you. He's saying, hey, you read my post. See then that both Hector and Achilles are warmongers. See then that they both value the fallacy of glory above the worth of any person's life. The true message of Homer's epic lies not in the solemn rites for the passing of Hector at the story's close, but in the graves of all the unnamed slaughtered throughout the conflict. So he's critiquing the culture that produces these philosophies of war. The Greeks at least had the facsimile of the gods to hide their guilt within. We do not have the same luxury. I love this shift here. Do not speak of either, so either Achilles or Hector as a hero. Look past the gilded patina of these combatants that has entertained the simple-minded of the epic's audience for generations, and see instead the lead weight at the core of the blood nickel they represent. Again, this is just, I want this student to be an English major. Of course, he's lost to me, I know, but I love the poetic nature of it. You don't have to be a poetic writer, though. I just like the structure of this. He offers us a clear argument that we could look at them as characters in diametric opposition, but we should see them as one and the same. So this is his personalized argument. As I say here, note the conclusion here and the reference again to the coin metaphor. And again, I don't think that people who see the textual and narrative differences are simple-minded. It's hard to read these books. I know it's tough, especially in 8 weeks. I do applaud the desire to move beyond comparisons and contrasts into crafting an argument, which in his case, this writer critiques the culture which produces such warriors and the endemic or the widespread war culture we see in the epics, which we've seen thus far and will continue to see, maybe more philosophically in Dante, I believe. But I really loved the structure of this one first. So I'm not saying here that you must strive to be a poetic writer like this particular student. It's great that he is, You don't have to be to create an argument. I wanted to highlight for you a little bit of the poesy. I can't help it. It's in my blood, folks. But I also wanted to highlight just the structure, right? He created an argument. He argued in the green. He offered evidence in the purple. And he then offered a ton of author commentary where he's making sense of his own ideas, right? So it's really important to kind of look at this one as a structural success first. And then the poetry is just a lovely frosting with sprinkles for the old Dr. Nzinga. Again, it's not perfect, but I wanted to isolate this structure for you because I keep talking about it in my Valkyrie files, and I just wanted to show you this structure. Okay, moving on to the next one. All right, you can see here again, I've annotated. I really wanted to point out a couple things about this one that I enjoy and that I think are incredibly strong. But I do have to point to what is the weakest of the entire post first. So the weakest aspect is the topic sentence, which needs some revision because it's too general. The similarities are few and the difference is vast between the examples of families we are given in the first and sixth books of the Iliad. So again, I like the narrowing down, looking at these books, acknowledging that was the kind of boundary in which the analysis occurs. I do want more specificity with similarities are few, differences vast, right? It's a good starting place for this author who might be drafting the response, but it needed a bit of revision. And sadly, it's the first thing I got to talk about. It's the weakest thing, but the rest has some great strengths that I really wanted to highlight for you guys. Notice how this student begins immediately with the similarities, right? And she, like the last person who wrote, she actually talks about obvious similarities, right? That consist of a man, his wife, their son. The interactions between their men and their wives have only one thing in common. Each man firmly tells their wife to mind their own business when questioned his decision. So these obvious similarities, right? And then she says, this is where the similarities between the patriarchs of each family end. So we know right here, we are going into contrasts. We're going to see the differences, right? The similarities end here. Let's move on to talk about not just the whole families, but the patriarchs. So again, I really admired this person giving herself permission in her language to speak about certain things. All right, in book 1, Job spoke harshly to his wife, saying that if she needed to know something, he would tell her. Otherwise, she needed to stay out of his counsel with the other gods. He threatened her with physical violence. In book 6, Hector was gentle with his wife. He told her that he understood her concerns, that he may perish in war and leave his sons fatherless and her a widow, but that war was a man's business and she should go back to her wifely duties. Beautiful way to give us specifics from the text and to illustrate these contrasts, yet also similarities. So I really enjoyed the idea that they're both speaking on the same subject, but they handled it differently. Now, notice how I'm going to say here to this writer, great evidence and discussion as the reader. I do want another sentence that tells me how and why one mate's behavior is better than, worse than, more appropriate than the other. So I kind of want some commentary here where my writer makes sense of this, right? Even pointing out, since they're both speaking on the same subject, how do they handle it and why is their handling of it better or worse, depending on the stance of the writer. But notice we've got this gorgeous textual evidence and this nicely structured paragraph. Another big difference, so notice we're getting our writer kind of saying to us, hey, here's another contrast to notice, right, is the way the men treated their sons. Jove had already maimed his son during a physically abusive attack on Juno, during an argument, presumably. He clearly had not learned from that situation as he still threatened violence against her, as I read book 1 of the Iliad. Hector, after hearing his wife lament his decision to go to war, lifted his son up, praying that he rule their people and be even better than he in battle and in life to make her proud. I want you to notice how, again, my commentary is almost the exact same here. Excellent reference to the text. Again, nice contrast. I would like one more sentence that concludes for us how, why one mate's behavior is better than, worse than, more appropriate than the others. This 1 or 2 sentences would be the commentary piece in which the author discusses how the evidence proves a point. Okay. Now I'm going to skip down here because I really want to illustrate to you how that 1 weak part could be revised. This writer comes to this wonderful conclusion here. Look at this sentence, guys. It's the last one. It seems that divine does not indicate excellence in this case, as Hector seems to be a much better husband and father, though he is merely human. I loved this sentence as it got to the heart of her argument, that Hector as a mortal outshone the divine Jove, Zeus. This is unexpected, no? I mean, you'd think that the gods would have this marriage thing down pat. They should serve as models of wedded bliss if we consider that they are, divine. This sort of judgment, this claim, so she's staking a claim here, would work nicely if moved up to the first sentence and reshaped a bit. So notice how this argument is very specific, could even become the very first sentence. With a little bit of revision, the first sentence of the piece. So that way, in each of the paragraphs that follow after this beautiful specific evidence that she offers, the writer could refer back to the topic sentence by commenting on how the evidence proves Hector is the greater mate, even though he's mortal, right? This is my revision of that topic sentence, by the way, or this last sentence for the topic sentence. In the Iliad, divine does not indicate excellence in marriage, since Hector is a much better husband and father than Jove, though he is merely human. Notice how I changed this. I took out seems that, main. I took out all of that kind of, I don't know, it's not wishy-washy language, but it's language that doesn't allow the writer to make a clear claim. So I took it out and I just went for the punch. In the Iliad, divine does not equal excellence in marriage, since Hector is. I just stated a claim. I stated an argument. So again, that's my suggestion, my idea here. Still a great example of what to do in a discussion, but when we talk about writing, the craft of writing and presenting an argument, these would be my suggestions. You can take a look back at that. The last example, I'm coming to the last. I love the way that this author narrows her scope in her topic sentences. And I really enjoyed the way, especially in this first couple of sentences, that she laid out the parameters of her discussion. So, based upon the scene involving Jove and Juno, Zeus and Hera, from Book 1, and the scene involving Hector and Andromache in Book 6, human and divine families have many common values. Love, pride, compassion, war, and choices are among the common values that the human and divine families express within the two books. She kind of goes a two-sentence route, which is fine, but we really get a sense of her narrowing her scope and arguing about the representation of the families in the two books of the epic. So I loved her decision to craft these sentences in this way. We get wonderful evidence offered, right? So we would, if we were color coding, we could say that this piece is purple. We would also have another piece of purple here, purple equaled evidence in the other. And again, there's this idea that she gives commentary. Just as divine families love one another through thick and thin, human families also did. You get the same kind of structure going on here as we did in that other one. Again, I do say here I'm impressed with the use of 3 pieces of evidence from the text in the paragraph, especially since each of the textual references, which go to 5 points on the rubric, were connected to the point about common values. And I hadn't thought about the first quotation about Juno and Jove sleeping together in quite the same way as Kristen did here. Notice how, again, this topic sentence announces or gives permission to the writer and announces to the reader what the paragraph's going to be about. Now, I would like a bit more specificity as I got in the first one with common values. And then I would want one more sentence here for commentary. But again, I love the structure here and the attention to laying out the boundaries of what this was going to be about. The evidence chain here, boom, boom, boom. And this first paragraph also impressed me. So we're talking about cogent, powerful writing, along with how to craft your discussion posts in such a way that you are putting forth ideas that indicate your engagement with the text. I know this is hard. I know it is. And I don't focus as much on writing as I do ideas in the discussion post, though I do look for specific answers to the questions, and that does have to be an argument as you're answering. I talk here, though, not just about content, but also about structure, since I want to help you as you're writing. I hope this does help. Email with questions, guys. Have a great night.